Greetings, GameCola faithful, and welcome to the GameCola Podcast. This is podcast number 148, not too early or too late, and I am your host and podcast commander, Joseph Martin, joined by...
Alex, the Jeddy Jedraszczak.
John, the Johnny Rizzi.
And James, the James. Is that like Mario? I don't know how to make my name sound funny.
You are fired.
But I don't even work here.
I mean, we're not getting paid anyway, so.
Wait, what?
You guys are getting paid?
I'm out of here.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to mourn the loss of a man, nay, an icon, nay, a friend to us all. Jumpman Mario, you were an inspiration to a world of gaming, and it is such a tragedy that you were taken from us before your time on March 31st, 2021. Our beloved plumber passed away in the night, never to be seen again. I'm sure you are all in a period of deep mourning at this time, and I would like to invite the other members of the GameCola staff to share their stories and condolences at this time.
Oh, Mario. Despite the fact...
No, Mario Jumpman Mario. A common misconception.
Despite the fact that Joe started this eulogy with the words that you normally hear at the beginning of weddings.
I looked it up. It's also used for this.
Marriage is what brings us together
But
today.
Not today.
No, who invited you? Jesus.
Well, I was going to say, it's a shame he was only alive for 21 days. He was born...
35 years.
He was born on Mar Io, and he's gone on Mar, presumably EI.
For those who have no idea what we are going on about, you may have noticed that certain video games are unavailable to be purchased at this time after the date in question. That is because the most significant being Super Mario Brothers 3D All-Stars, or whatever the actual title of it. The collection of Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Galaxy is no longer available digitally and will presumably no longer be given. New copies will not be given to stores to sell, though of course physical copies will continue to persist till the end of time. But the mourning
running
is
thousands
in the fact
of dollars in the used market.
Yes, the mourning is
Even
in that.
Even though there was actually 8 million physical copies of that game out, though.
Yeah, that game, and the Mario 35, everybody plays Mario at the same time game. I don't even know if you can play it anymore. You definitely can't download it.
Nope.
You can't play
it. Cannot play it anymore.
Damn.
Yeah.
And then also a Fire Emblem.
Also a Fire Emblem game.
Oh, yeah. Fire Emblem 1.
The translation, the first ever time the game was translated, aside from, the DS remake that came out 10, 15 years ago.
But that one didn't have big old bits and blocks,
We're just going to pretend
James.
that didn't happen, apparently.
It didn't have big old bits and blocks. Is it even the same video game? In a tiny little box. I want my big blocks in my video games, James. Only the biggest blocks for me. I want one solid changing pixel. That is the peak of video games to me, and probably where the indie space is gradually tending towards at this rate.
Yeah, I'm talking Duplo over here.
Wow, look at the graphics.
So the question on everyone's mind, I'm pretty sure, in a sense, some more esoterically than others, is why? Why has Nintendo decided to stop making or producing or allowing the purchase of a video game that by all accounts people will want to purchase and play fairly indefinitely, given the very nature of it being a game that contains several older games that people were interested in playing far into the future from their original releases.
I have an answer.
What is your answer? It might also be my answer.
Capitalism?
Well, yes.
The real corporate answer is to create artificial demand and value.
Right.
So people will flock and they'll meet and they'll all buy the game within a certain period of time, and it'll make their financial stocks go up for a certain amount of time. And then so they look at that financial period and be like, hey, we did great this time.
Right.
All right, time to pull this stuff out so we don't lose money on keeping it on the shop.
So what John is alluding to is the fact that this cutoff date for, fear of missing out. If you don't buy the game by this date, you can't get it, comes right at the end of a financial quarter. I believe the first one would be my guess, considering it's March.
Yes.
Yes. But I am not a businessman.
2021.
So I cannot say for sure. But, so the idea potentially being that they want to squeeze all of the potential sales of this game out as fast as possible to get that number for that quarter up, presumably believing that any other games they have coming for the second quarter would make up for it, or they don't care about the second quarter as much. I imagine Q1 and Q4 are the most important quarters because that's when all the video games come out. So the other thing, in addition to the whole quarter stuff, quarter 1 and quarter 4 and all of that shebang, is something that I think sort of speaks broader to Nintendo's strategy, because there are a lot of ways to make money with video games in ways that are anti-consumer and perhaps even unethical.
Mm-hmm.
But why this one in particular, right? And this goes to my conspiracy theory that Nintendo is trying to be Disney. And not just regular Disney, but specifically 1990s Disney.
The Disney Vault has come back.
You've got the Disney Vault.
Nintendo had bought it.
You've got the Disney Vault with the Mario 3D All-Stars. You've got a theme park that they've just announced and is opened up. They are getting even more obsessive and protective of their IP.
Yeah.
I feel like they're really just using Disney's rise to media oligarchy. I'm probably not using that word correctly, but you get the vibe I'm going for. They're using the growth of Disney as a template for how they want to grow their work into a globally recognized brand in a similar way. I really think that is almost explicitly what they're doing. But I don't know, obviously we don't like it, especially I think people like the theme park. The theme park's fine.
I've heard good things about it.
At least within the scope of how theme parks are. Maybe there's something where theme parks are killing the planet. But it's no worse than any other theme park. And people seem down with it. So I won't rag on the theme park. It's just part of the general theme. But the being super protective of the IP and... Yes, thank you, James. And these basically vault, right? I bet next console they will roll 3D All-Stars back out if my theory is correct. Their plan is to roll the game out periodically, get that bump in sales from fear of missing out, and then take it away again.
Yeah, the taking it away part, it's sort of like how if you wanted to buy Pinocchio, it came out on VHS, it came out on DVD, it came out on Blu-ray, you know,
Right, exactly.
There's a built-in aspect of even if they wanted to continue the Switch store over to the new Switch U,
Switch U? Oh no!
Yeah,
how many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
Yeah, that even if they wanted to continue the store over, well, you still don't have the game. You know, you have to purchase it yet again.
So you can recycle that whole thing. The problem is though that and why I think that like part of this may be wishful thinking, that I just hope this doesn't go the way they want it to and they give up on the whole idea. And maybe that's just me, but and my desires. But I think that like the problem with copying 1990s Disney strategies is that it is no longer the 1990s.
Yeah.
Like Disney, the Disney Vault concept completely breaks down in the advent of streaming and digital media ownership. Yeah. Right? Because with the physical copies, there is at least this veneer of, oh, they're just choosing not to sell the product. And I think a lot of games, like, they don't publicize it. And in that sense, that's where you build in the fear of missing out aspect of it. But there are probably a lot of games that, like, at some point said, we're not going to take our game down from the store, but we're not selling enough that it makes sense to keep making physical copies. And so they cut off the physical copies. But there's no sense in taking it down from the store because the game will just be available.
They pay for the infrastructure regardless.
Right. And you can save money not selling physical, but if you've already... all of the cost of the digital really goes into the front end. And I don't...
So if anything, you lose money by not continuing to sell
right.
it. Which that... Sorry, go
Well, ahead. I was just going to jump into with Jeddy, because Jeddy has experience with... not just digital platforms, but did you do Xbox Live? I know Paul did.
Xbox Live briefly. I was on Xbox Live Indie Games. Yes,
But I mean, just like in the same thing, like right once you put your game on Xbox Live Indie Games, unless people were mad at you about something and you wanted to disappear off the face of the planet, there's no cost to keeping a game on a digital platform, right?
Yeah.
Unless there's some sort of subscription model of being a member or whatever.
So there was actually a subscription model for being a developer and being allowed to publish games on the thing, but I don't think you actually had to continue paying after that point. After your game was published, it was up regardless of whether you paid the $90 a year Xbox Live Indie Games developer fee.
Well, here's where that doesn't really work though. Nintendo owns their store. They don't have to pay their own publishing and licensing fees because this is a first-party title. Like, even if it was a third-party developer, you could theoretically make that argument because I don't know how much or at least the average consumer at least, knows about how publishing on the online shop works. But this is Nintendo.
Right.
It's their own platform, their own store. They don't have to pay anything to keep the game up.
Right. That is my point. Like the digital, you can't use the 90s vault concept in a realm where digital media ownership exists. Even regardless, like your points are good, but even regardless of those points, it really just doesn't bear out in the details. I mean, and I feel like even from like consumer attitudes, right? Like you see people getting upset about like a show that they watch all the time. There are those people who watch The Office at literally every waking moment of their lives, and I don't understand it, but I can respect it, and it
makes no
sense.
It's
their prerogative, and if it brings them joy, happy for them. But you know, something moves to another platform, and people get upset about that. Like, so it's not. I don't know. The people seemed. I don't know.
So one thing I was going to say is I do think that you're right with the artificial scarcity and also with the fear of missing out, is that if they just put the game up and there's no limits, everyone's going to sit there with it on their wish list and wait for the one day that perhaps it goes 10% off, and then maybe one day in a few years they might buy it. Meanwhile, if they say, hey, it's there for a limited time, anyone who was considering buying it is going to buy it immediately.
Right.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I just don't know if that works. It'll certainly work. I think it'll certainly bear out in the short term, right? Like the economics of it, completely removing any sort of moral or ethical considerations. It should work. Like, the basic theory of it makes sense. I just don't know. I certainly don't want it to be what they do from here on out. And I don't know if when they review the effects of it, how it does affect their brand, how, people were talking about it, and maybe they don't want to have all of that negative attention every time they take something off, right? Because they may have gotten a lot of money, but they did also get, I would say, considerably more negative attention than they usually get for a lot of their other stuff. Right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that people complain about that Nintendo does, but, like, not really in a way that I would say affects their brand, but people talking about the death of Mario, kind of like what we're doing here, that kind of feels like the thing that would actually get to them. Like, they don't care if you get upset that they shut down a tournament because of weird internet hack stuff, right? I really don't think that they care about that, because it's really focused on a subset of the community that is also kind of a subset of that community. And it's still like it's not, that doesn't mean that it's not important in a larger sense, but in terms of like how much Nintendo has to care about that, how much it costs them to act the way that they do, I feel like for the greater gaming space it doesn't really have an effect on them. Whereas like people talking about their main mascot dying and making that joke, that feels like, even though I feel like that is less important, like that kind of joke is less important, it feels like, based on the way that they've been handling their IP, that is something that would bother them more, if that makes sense.
I will also
Here's hoping it does.
Yeah, I will also say though
we're doing our part.
There's a point though where there's no such thing as bad press. That like,
right.
we're talking about a topic that otherwise we wouldn't have, and that sort of makes us think more about the Nintendo Switch and games that might be on there, and that just due to talking about it and discussing it and listening to this podcast on your platform of choice, whether it be iTunes or Spotify or YouTube or wherever else you might find us, that just gets your mind on the topic and then causes you to later go and play your Switch more often and buy other games. So there's a point where at a corporate level they don't actually care. They care more about the fact that you're discussing it than temporary consumer sentiment over a topic that doesn't directly affect purchasing. Like, oh, the death of Mario. It seems like a sad topic, but it's getting you talking about Mario.
Right. I definitely agree with that. And like, logically that makes sense. I just feel like the way that Nintendo has been handling their IP and being persnickety with it, it would end up bothering them. Like, even if in a financial sense, no press is bad press. Like, I still think that their brand IP team that cares a lot about things to the point that it really affects the way that they design their video games, I feel like this would get under their skin.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that.
To the extent that would actually affect anything, I have no idea. I would also, counter that with saying we talk about Nintendo Switch games pretty much all the time on this podcast. So us talking about it in a negative light is at least net neutral in terms of our impact on helping Nintendo out in times like these.
Yes.
The question...
It's all about their... Yeah, it's just... In the long run, it's all about their brand and how much they want protected, and also how much they want to recoup over having their potential losses during a pandemic, most likely.
I don't know. I feel like video games probably handle especially with the fact that there is a lot of digital distribution infrastructure. I feel like, and like, I mean, we're sort of segueing. I had a whole bit about like what's the next Disney-like thing Nintendo's going to do, but I don't think it was going to go anywhere anyway. So we'll pivot to what John was talking about, because
charge $60 for Skyward Sword HD.
Well, I was more thinking about you shared on the Discord, and I don't know if we've talked about this yet, but you shared on the Discord a while back pricecharting.com, which tracks the prices that video games are selling. And, I did it because I thought it was cool. And you're right. It's kind of like treating your video games like stock, even though practically speaking, video games generally, even the ones that maintain their value, don't really maintain their value with inflation, really. Like, it has to be increasing in value by a certain amount as time goes on for it to actually be an investment in that sense. But, like, there are certain games that have skyrocketed over the pandemic, including my copy of Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, which is going wild right now.
I think that's wild. You should see the horror game market. Holy crap.
I believe you there. The one I'm more familiar with is the Pokemon market. Pokemon market, secondhand Pokemon video games have exploded.
For a minute, I just heard secondhand Pokemon market, and I was like, could you imagine if there was a secondhand Pokemon market in universe? That would be kind of wild. I'm sorry to take the topic off, but just that mental image of, like, you know, instead of releasing the Pokemon, you trade them. Like, I mean, I guess in a sense, trading Pokemon is kind of like a used market for Pokemon, although definitely not in, like, it's a much more personal sort of thing. You're not like selling bulk 12 Pokeballs, random assortment. Like, you just go on eBay. Sorry.
Well, yeah, but I think, like, generally, like, you know, the whole collection has just increased in value, and it doesn't really mean anything because I'm probably not going to sell any of them anyway. But maybe when I die, it'll mean something for my family if they want to sell all my video games. But like, Pokemon in particular has been increasing. I feel like all of them have been increasing, and I think, you know, people are stuck at home. They're playing more video games, you know, even if you're just factoring out a reduction in commute, right? Yeah. That extra time is going to hobbies, and for the people who play video games, that's probably just extending their video game hobby.
Yeah, it's a lot of people getting nostalgic over games they used to play as a kid, and it's like, I had a lot of fun. I'm stuck in this apartment with 3 people. Well, it'll be cool if we had, like, Mario Party 6 or something. How much is it going for now? Oh, crap.
It's almost at $100 now.
I bought a cartridge of Pokemon Silver a week ago. It costs $70.
Do you know how much Pokemon Platinum costs?
$40.
Oh no! Like over 100.
I should sell my copy then.
If you don't intend on playing it anymore, like, honestly, probably. Hold on, let me look. We got to be careful because otherwise this will become the whole podcast. But I will.
Just
let me
looking
look
up the value. We interrupt this podcast while the GameCola staff members figure out how much money they can make selling their old games.
I kind of have a point to segue back to what we were talking about before about digital distribution, but
go for it.
I recently bought a new 3DS because my old one was dying, and I was like, okay, cool. I'll just splurge on a new one. I got a paycheck, why not? So I went on the eShop on the 3DS. They're still selling, like, all the Game Boy Virtual Console games that they put on there. And I'm like, why haven't they taken these down yet? Because they discontinued the 3DS, but the store is still up, and still is the Wii U eShop.
Now that you've said that, it will go down in time.
Well, no, that's the interesting thing.
I know, but that's the thing.
It is a good point. It is a great point.
You could still buy Pokemon Crystal on your 3DS for $10.
Yeah.
What I think
it's still interesting.
Yeah, like the fact that games have become. Certain games, like, become available digitally has not had the same sort of impact on the value of the game, right? You would think it would go down, but that doesn't really seem to be the case. It doesn't, and I like Pokemon Platinum. There's literally, and we're gonna segue and talk about this more later in the podcast. But Pokemon Platinum is literally essentially being remade. People are gonna buy it on the Switch. Why does anybody need to play it now when they can just play it in a little bit? This game is worth $130 without a case, just a little piece of plastic. It's $130.
My parents bought for one of my sister's birthday recently. They bought just the cart of Pokemon Ranger Shadows of Almia, I think it was the second the sequel to the original Pokemon Ranger. Yeah. Just that cartridge, I think, was $50. Yeah,
I mean, Pokemon stuff is going on, and like that Pokemon Platinum has jumped in price by $40 since the remakes were announced. Like,
Good
what is
grief.
happening? So it's really
If anything,
interesting.
the price should go down.
That's what I'm
not
saying.
Up.
That's what we're saying, James. It doesn't. And then,
what is this?
And then, of course,
Stonks.
you have Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, worth almost $200, more than I could sell my Wii U for, according to this website. The only thing more expensive in my collection, more expensive than the GameCube, the limited edition GameCube themed around the very game, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, only worth $112. I don't understand how that happens.
Wow.
But also, this is another thing that's wild to me about a lot of this stuff. It's not a good video game. It's not good.
Hey, listen, I'm sure you're gonna take
nail in the
someone
coffin.
off saying that.
I think like Pokemon Coliseum may be better. I have not played it. I know a lot of people talk about Coliseum and really liking it, and that's fair. This is the whole conceit of it. I played this game as a kid, and you know what? I think the first time I played it, I did enjoy it well enough. But going back, like a decade later, I'm playing it, I'm like, I already feel bored playing this game because it's so samey at the beginning, because the main thing is that you can only catch shadow Pokemon, which are Pokemon of other trainers that have been mistreated, and so they're shadow, and so you can save them by capturing them from other trainers. But that means that for like half of the game, you are limited to the just first 6 Pokemon that you encounter, and it takes forever for you to even get that team of 6, and it's always going to be the same Pokemon.
So that's where the inspiration for Nuzlocke came from.
So it's just, I don't know. We don't need to go into it, but that's like the other thing was like, it's not necessarily the quality of the game. In fact, a lot of the time, it rarely has to do more with how many copies were sold. And if it was a bad game, it probably sold fewer copies. A lot of the time, the worst games of a series end up being the most expensive because it's part of a well-known series, so people know about it. And then people want it because they want like the full series, but it didn't sell a lot of copies, so there aren't a lot of physical copies out there. You see that a lot with, like, for example, Mega Man X3, I would argue, not really good, but it's very expensive compared to the other ones. And even if you like Mega Man X3, I think you would be hard pressed to defend it being as much better than the other games as it is more expensive. Same with Mega Man, the Mega Man Zero series. Zero 3 is very clearly considered the best one. I have looked on all of the message boards. Pretty much everyone seems to agree. And Mega Man Zero 1 is a mess. And it was basically an unfinished game, and then they finished it in Zero 2. But it's the most expensive one because they made fewer of it because nobody bought it because it wasn't very good and they didn't have the brand recognition and all of that. So it's all of that is interesting.
Resident Evil Survivor on the PS1 is worth a little bit more than the original copies or like the original entries in the series. And I can guarantee you, the only one who's probably played Resident Evil Survivor is Angry Video Game Nerd. To be honest.
So to pivot away before this becomes reading the price of video games on a website, the podcast, we should maybe go into the Pokemon discussion that I foreshadowed just during this little segment break here. But if you didn't know, because we didn't talk about it because it happened like just after we recorded the last podcast, Pokemon did announce 2 new games, and then there's also new Pokemon Snap, which had already been announced. But if you're interested in new Pokemon Snap, you probably all know all of the information about new Pokemon Snap because there's not very much out there. It's pretty succinct. You can take pictures of Pokemon in the new game, and it looks higher fidelity than the old game, and you can do it at daytime and at nighttime. And
wait, what? Nighttime?
And you can put little photo effects on the photos that you take and share them online, and that's pretty much everything. So let's move on to the.
But can you go to Blockbuster and get them printed out?
I don't think so.
I mean,
if
you
you
want to
know
drive
that was
all the way to Alaska.
Oregon.
Yeah,
Oregon. There was one in Oregon.
Oh, there's one in. Oh, I thought it was in Alaska or something. The last Blockbuster.
Nah.
Yeah, I mean,
that's in Oregon.
Or Oregon still
Well,
is
that's actually
far.
pretty close.
Yeah,
I can drive down there and it only takes 6 hours. I can drive down there and have my new Pokemon Snap
we can get
photos.
Dude, come
printed.
pick me up. We'll make a road trip out of it.
We can get
Heck yeah,
Michael Gray,
GameCola road trip.
Michael Gray to meet you out there. He's in Oregon. It's
Yeah.
like 2 hours.
Oh yeah, he goes there all the time, doesn't he?
Oh, that's right.
So, perhaps a little more interesting than, well, maybe not. Maybe
Excuse
not
you.
more interesting than road trips to the last Blockbuster in Oregon. But nonetheless, more on topic perhaps, is the fact that they announced 2 games. The first was the remakes, the long-awaited and expected and anticipated remakes of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, originally on the Nintendo DS in the mid-2000s, being released with a Nintendo Switch versions of each game. Interestingly, specifically called out in the presentation, not published directly, or developed, I should say, not developed directly by Game Freak, but by another studio that I forget the name of right off the top of my head. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, by the way, is the name of the games.
I think the name is kind of for me, but I'm also not quite sure what they would have done.
Yeah.
What if they called it Flawless Diamond?
Flawless Diamond.
I'm
Well,
sure
then-
some fans would have some objections on that one.
Yeah, because then it implies that the Pearl version has flaws.
So Ilka is the name of the
Gesundheit.
yes, very nice.
I hate you.
Sorry.
They have worked on it seems like with Pokemon specifically, they worked on Pokemon Home, and they've done work on a bunch of other games like Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, Yakuza 0. I'm just reading a list. Nier Automata.
Oh.
Though I should mention that something I have seen pop up is that they were not like the main developers of any of those games. It seems like that they're perhaps don't necessarily quote me on this, but my understanding is that they're sort of like have been hired out to help produce these games. So like basically
like
additional
contracted.
Contracted. That's a good way to put it. Probably an accurate way to put it. Being brought on to help produce and develop a game. So it's sort of up in the air what their abilities are. This will probably for them as a company, this is probably sort of big break territory. Like, you know, if they do something that's really well received, that probably secures them in this position for the foreseeable future. If Pokemon remakes are going to be a thing that continues into the foreseeable future, if they nail this one, they're probably going to have a consistent source of income and employment for a while.
And it probably means we'll get black and white remakes.
So that's
oh god.
so there's that.
I'm surprised that they didn't. Game Freak didn't contract Grezzo to do the remakes.
That is a good point,
'Cause they-
actually.
yeah, 'cause
I
they
was
did
going to
the,
think.
They did the remake of Link's Awakening on Switch, which is a Game Boy game, and it has
and-
the same
and-
exact art style as the Pokemon games.
Yeah.
And they did the 3DS remakes of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask.
They're the secondhand Zelda company, basically.
My suspicion is that they are probably working on some other Nintendo product right now. That would be, I would say that maybe Game Freak could not land them because they're working on something else. Are they not working? I would honestly maybe even think that some of their team at least is working on, in some capacity, the Zelda Skyward Sword remake, though that may be a completely different thing. I don't know.
Let me look that up, actually. I'm curious.
That's a good point. I didn't ever see if they were contracting out somebody. Well, but didn't Nintendo do Wind Waker HD, Twilight Princess HD, and all that in-house?
Yeah, and
though?
I think I remember this
they
was
did.
actually in-house. So, but my guess would be that they're working on something else. Something a little more
that
high
seems like a smart
priority.
bet.
And I say that because I think it's also important to contextualize. With Diamond and Pearl remakes, these are probably the most like one-to-one take on remakes that we've seen so far. They kind of emphasize that in the material. A lot of the other remakes focus on really modernizing the art style and, you know, bringing it up. This is like, certainly they're updating the graphical fidelity, but they are doing a lot more to maintain the original image, right? So the sprite characters are like the same dimensions as they were in the DS games. They're very short and squat in the overworld, and then you've got the full character models that appear in battle. This is in part because they also announced coming out in the spring. So this will be coming, Shining Diamond and Brilliant Pearl coming out in the fall. Standard November video game rush.
I think you switched the names.
Maybe I did.
Shining Diamond. Is it Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, or Shining Diamond and Brilliant?
Sparkly gemstones. That's the important.
Yeah. Pokemon New Diamond and New Pearl.
Exactly. We've been teasing this for too long. Pokemon Legends, Arceus, Arceus, however you want to say it. It's inconsistent across the branding. I say Arceus because that's how I read it, and C plus E makes this sound, and that's just stuck in my head. I'm pretty sure the katakana says otherwise, but that's Pokemon.
Depending on your regional dialect.
Exactly. Which is a more modern looking take on a Pokemon game. You're running around in a big old overworld. You're having encounters with Pokemon walking around, but it takes place hundreds of years ago, during the, I think, if you watch all of the Theorycraft videos, they're like, oh yeah, this takes place in the late 1800s, or a period akin to the late 1800s, because obviously Pokemon has some sort of alternative history. Basically,
the late 1800s.
Yes. And it takes place in that era, and it's building off of themes and cultural ideas of that era. And then also I have seen tell, and again, this is sort of rumory, so, mileage may vary when it comes out, but my understanding is that it's going to have some sort of active, real-time RPG battling system, which, from my understanding...
I believe that's confirmed.
Okay.
I saw at least a Japanese publication saying it's going to use a system similar to Final Fantasy's ATB.
Right, so that's when the little bar fills up, and then that's when you can use another attack.
And when it fills up, and it fills up based on, like, the agility or something of your character, right. And when it's full, you can go...
And...
I just want to get this out because I need to talk about this point. They were talking about, so you can go into battle without any Pokemon in your party, and the Pokemon will just attack you directly and can knock you out.
So you got your combat roll.
Can I just say, holy cow, I never thought they would actually do that. I think they may have done that a little bit in the anime or the manga from time to time, Pokemon attacking humans, but the games... Yeah. I don't think they've ever really discussed that too much, that Pokemon attacking humans or anything like that. But just being a little bit more of a primitive setting, I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
That they're finally, like, in some capacity talking about, the dynamic of, potentially, I don't know if hostile, I guess hostile is is an appropriate term to use. Hostile environment of capturing Pokemon.
Didn't Mewtwo kill like 40 people?
Gen 1 doesn't count.
That's the anime. That's the anime and the movies.
It might be in the books, in the little books in the mansion where you read about Mewtwo.
In the mansion,
I would imagine that would be severely retconned in whatever counts as Pokemon continuity these days. What I'm really interested in, almost a morbid curiosity, because I'm not entirely sure it's feasible to land it well, is the fact that Pokemon has always sort of landed its themes in a near future, almost utopian society sort of framework, right? There's advanced technology, but it's not too dissimilar from our modern technology. It's near future.
They also have guns. In the anime.
I'm talking more about the games, and also I think they've retconned that a little bit too. We're talking about more modern stuff.
I think they did, because the game theorists made One of my favorite game theory videos is talking about how Pokemon battling are basically just the only thing standing between full anarchy and armed conflict in the Pokemon world. It's just that, like, without Pokemon battles to act as an intermediary for conflicts and other disagreements, people would just bust out guns.
Mm-hmm. So like, but like, you know, you can even see in interviews with like the development leads and like brand ambassadors, like they talk about the Pokemon world as like a world that doesn't have to worry about things like global warming, or, you know, warfare, right? Those aren't themes that are addressed in the modern Pokemon games. Obviously the original didn't really know what it was doing, didn't have any sort of forward thinking
in
with
a
that.
lot of ways,
right? But like it's a concept that has developed over time, but has certainly cemented itself. You know, you have the technology is amazing guy. Like that is one of the core pieces of Pokemon.
Ever since the first game,
that, like, you know, the advancement of technology will be a benefit to the world, and it will have all of these benefits. Like, then that's sort of the framework that Pokemon has entered in.
Befriending Pokemon as well
Right.
is another aspect of that, of the benefits. I think a bunch of the different games themselves in their plots talk about the benefits of human and Pokemon interactions. Right. Heck, it was arguably the plot of Black and White.
Right.
To a certain extent, that was a big key focus, is about whether or not the world is better off having humans and Pokemons interacting with each other.
And the whole idea that Pokemon is essentially a very loose, broad allegory for the love of pets. I think I watched a video about one of the newer Pokemon designer, like someone who designs new Pokemon, and he was talking about how, like, at least from the design philosophy, Pokemon is about the love of pets, and so every Pokemon, aside from maybe, you know, some of the like legendaries that have other elements to them, but in the basic sense, Pokemon needs to look like something that could be your friend. A Pokemon needs to look like that in some way. There needs to be some element there. So what I'm getting at, though, is that all of those themes really land in an environment where it is the near future, and you can sort of abstract away the any particular cultural influences. But when you go back in time, you start having to address a lot more, either address or more directly ignore those sorts of concepts, right? Like, it's all well and good to say, yes, here is a near future utopia where there isn't any large scale war. But if you start going into the past and start making references to a past, even if it's an alt history, there's gonna be things that you have to address, that, like, real things that have happened. And I'm not entirely sure they're gonna do a great job of that. There's people much more qualified to talk about what those actual pitfalls are. I would suggest you do your own research into this time period and what was going on in the world. There are many things that many people would probably say were not great, and Game Freak is either going to have to find a way to address them or just completely look them over. And it will be interesting to see what people have to say about that when it happens. So I'm very interested in almost a morbid way to see how that will all land going forward. We'll have to see. But that is sort of my concern. And we'll get more information as time goes on and they break it down a little bit more. But so the other thing to bring it back to is that you have the remakes and then this new game. So there's two games that are sort of feeding into the Sinnoh remake idea, right? Because the Legends Arceus also takes place in Sinnoh. In ancient is maybe not the right word because it's like 200 years ago. In past Sinnoh and the more modern remake. And it's almost like you've taken the people who want the really accurate, faithful remake, and then you want the people who really just want something different but themed around a location that they're familiar with. Instead of trying to make one game that addresses both of those, which is what I feel like especially Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire were trying to do. They've just made two different games and are trying to satisfy those two different audiences, which I think, you know, obviously it depends on execution, but like honestly, it's kind of a good idea because I think one of the biggest issues that Pokemon has had recently is the fact that they're trying to appeal to every type of person who plays video games. And I feel like especially in Sword and Shield, you can see how that's really stretched things thin, along with all of the other issues that I think the development had. But you've got all of the people who really like the narrative and like putting themselves in the Pokemon world, and you've got all of these characters that have clearly a lot of thought put into them from a baseline perspective, right? The pieces of great character design are there, and then they don't have the great story to put on top of it. The narrative is pretty much almost non-existent. But you look at artists, they love these Sword and Shield characters, guys. Artists love these things. And I think that's, so you've got that. Then you've got systems like, you have interesting ideas like the wild area that clearly sought to reinvent things in a way that appealed to the people who were looking for something more mechanically interesting in the way that the structure of Pokemon went. And they have this great idea, and that's something that a lot of people see a lot of potential in, but then they didn't stick the landing. And then with competitive, you've got, this idea that, hey, Mega Evolutions and Z-Moves are cool, but from a practical standpoint, having every game have like 1 million different items that you need to collect to be able to play competitive isn't viable long term. So we need to come up with new systems and new ways of interacting to help support the community. And then they throw in Dynamax, which solves that problem on paper, but then it isn't really balanced in any way that actually makes it useful. And so like I think part of the issue with Sword and Shield that could be rectified by splitting things up like this is no longer trying to appeal to literally everyone with one game. Because it's not as if anyone, who am I to say that the people who like story should just be cut out, or the people who like competitive just shouldn't be considered? But at the same time, there's the understanding that like it's really hard to address all of those people, but Pokemon's global brand relies on them addressing all of those audiences to maintain its global brand power. So I think this is part of their way of addressing it, is really trying to maybe split things up to address these groups more separately with multiple games instead of one game that ends up just being kind of mediocre in all aspects, or having certain good points of all aspects, but not like one cohesive thing that everybody likes. And I said a lot about Pokemon. It's time for other people to talk if they want to.
Jack of all trades, trying to avoid a jack of all trades, master of none.
Right,
basically.
Right.
That's a really interesting take. I had not considered that angle of it at all, really. But now that you mention it, it does seem like that certainly could be the case. Although, again, with the vastly different gameplay style, I almost feel it's more like they're trying to avoid dropping another okay, because first we had Mega Evolution, then now we have Dynamaxing, which are like, okay, they're not the same thing,
right? But they feel the
but
same.
They're kind of the same thing.
They fulfill the same
from
purpose.
a game design perspective.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
like you were saying. They're very similar in terms of what they accomplish. They're just spectacle.
Yeah, they
really.
fit into the
They
narrative.
don't add
the same
much
way
to the.
too. Like the way that they're dressed in the narrative is also very similar. You have to get a special wristband that lets you do the thing, and only really good trainers can really manage to do the thing.
Yeah. Despite the fact that apparently there's a lot of really good trainers out there. Yeah. And it's just like. It's tough because it's cool to see them innovate, and I like adding new and interesting things to Pokemon, but just throwing in a new / old gameplay mechanic or adding a new spin on an existing gameplay mechanic with every title, that doesn't scale. That doesn't last
you have
more
to get
than
rid
one
of
or
them.
two generations before people get tired of it. And I think that maybe I hope at least that they take this time, this kind of downtime between Gen 8 and a potential Gen 9 to do something new, try something out that's very experimental, which is the Legends game. while also satisfying, like you said, the more classic fans who want a kind of a something that doesn't have all this extra fluff and stuff thrown in on top of the formula that they already are familiar with.
Right, the people who want just Diamond and Pearl with faster decreasing health bars.
Yeah, that doesn't take a minute to to kill.
That's all they need. That's all they want. Just let them have it.
Yeah, like just like, and I've said this in. To a couple different people, but I really hope that while it definitely seems like they may not be including all of the story elements from Platinum, I really hope they include everything else from Platinum. That is, the slightly better UI. I hope they speed up the menus, because scrolling through your bag is so slow in that game. The only way to make it go fast is using the little spinner on the touchscreen, and that's annoying. But also, there are dungeons that are borderline unfinished in Diamond. I said this in the GameCola Discord before, but anybody remember the math dungeon? Or not the math dungeon, the math gym in, I think it was Heart Home City, where you just walked into a completely empty room with a sign in the middle of it that had a math problem on it, and based on your answer, you walk into one of 3 doors. And, like, there was no aesthetic to the dungeon whatsoever. It was just empty, featureless rooms
and
with a single sign.
Math themed because math is spooky and so are ghosts.
Yeah, like, it made no sense. Platinum really did a lot of that, but it also, different things like the different buildings that Platinum infiltrated were almost entirely featureless in certain buildings. Like places that you visit for story purposes were just generic apartment tile sets. Mm-hmm. And then were given complete facelifts in Platinum. I really, if nothing else, they really need to include all the additional content, non-story content that they had from Platinum, because comparing the two, I really think it is the case that you could argue that Diamond and Pearl were almost unfinished by comparison. Mm-hmm. And that's what I really hope. And getting back on track to what I was talking about earlier, I hope that what they're trying to, that Game Freak and Nintendo and the Pokemon Company are trying to do here is, I think we discussed this on previous podcasts, that they were caught up in the success of Pokemon Go and all this other stuff, and now they're still kind of trying to work out what they want to do, how they want to move forward. Mm-hmm. And I hope that they take this downtime between generations. Now that they're making this one game that's really experimental, they'll see how it does, see what the reaction is. Then they'll see how this classic remake that tries to be very nice and faithful goes. And then they'll take what they learned from both of these, and that what they learned from Gen 8, Sword and Shield, and try and use these different aspects to try and decide where they want to take the series in the future with Generation 9, or even if maybe they want to split the series up and have the experimental stuff be in their own kind of branch, and then just make future regular Pokemon games be more classical styled. Although I personally don't think that's going to be the case, because again, just rehashing the same thing over and over will only get you so far, and it really works best if the reason that you are rehashing something is because you're also rehashing a game that was built off of those more basic mechanics in the past. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely going to be a balance if they decide to go with a more classical approach for future games.
We will be watching their careers with great interest. I think there is a lot that we could potentially say about like this whole thing. There's a lot of depth to like that whole thing, and maybe things can also change a lot as more information comes out. So we'll really have to see. I think we should, though, move into brief stints in games that we've been playing. First of all, I will just throw in one thing I have done as I was doing a Pokemon Fire Red Nuzlocke. I'm in Victory Road, and I was doing really well until I got to Victory Road, and then it turns out Victory Road is actually hard when you don't just have a Blastoise that's like level 70 that can one-hit KO everything. There's people who actually use like strategy in there. There was like
Is it a randomizer Nuzlocke?
No, it's
or
just
a
regular. But there was a Dugong that had sheer cold with one-hit KO move, and it's like, I've never seen that before, and then my Dugtrio died.
See,
oh no, what was it?
Never play a Nuzlocke.
I think it was Machoke. It was Machoke because that's why it was out against the Dugong.
Fighting versus ice.
But that's been interesting. But then I also just to end a story that I think I did talk about on the podcast before. I think I mentioned a long lost Game Boy game, like original Game Boy game that I had when I got the original Game Boy. It was this basketball game that I remembered being terrible, but I had no idea where it went. Turns out, our car, someone came into the parking lot and stole the catalytic converter from it. And so it had to be taken into the shop. And when they took it into the shop, they took it apart and they found a whole bunch of stuff in the car seats. And it turns out that that's where that video game was the whole time. And so I was able to get it back, see that it was an LJN game, which explained a lot, and play it. And guess what? It is really bad. The only thing you can do is there's a half court. You pick one of the names of a basketball players that I know Larison Bird, whoever he is.
What, you don't know Larry Bird?
I know the name. I recognize the name as a good basketball player. And then you run around this half court, and if you don't have the ball, you run up to the person and mash A really fast, and maybe you'll get the ball. And if you have the ball, you press the B button to jump, and then while you're in the air, you press the B button again, and the ball will go toward the goal, and it's kind of just, maybe it'll go in. And the computer is much better at deciding whether or not it will go in. And that's the video game.
Sounds like NBA Jam to me.
That's the video game. So we can finally put a little bow on that story wherever it is in the GameCola canon. That is what happened to that video game, and it is now returned to my collection for better or for worse. John,
who steals a catalytic converter?
Yeah, I was gonna.
Apparently, they're like $300. I don't know.
Jesus.
Well,
yeah, but what? They must have the same car as you,
Yeah,
I
or
would
something.
imagine they were gonna sell it
Oh yeah.
to someone, to a
You did
fence,
have
who
that
would
car.
then provide it to whoever wanted a catalytic converter, or melt
On
it down
eBay
for the gold,
$7,000.
or melt it down for like the gold or copper or whatever's in it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, John, what video games have you been playing in recent times?
Short answer: Tomb Raider. Lots and lots of Tomb Raider. I recently bought a PS3, a Model 1 PS3 that's backwards compatible with PS2 and PS1 and all that good stuff. So I also bought the entire, pretty much the entire back catalog of the Tomb Raider games. And the first one still holds up. I am surprised. It is such a good video game. Like it's atmospheric. Exploration is very rewarding. The puzzles are very obtuse, especially if you're going for like all the secrets. Like there's one secret you have to like stand on 3 different floor texture tiles on the ground that have like very little indication that they are, and then a door on the other side of the room opens up for like a short amount of time, and you're like, why is that? And then there's like so many I do love it how every jump you make, it's like when you make a jump in a Mario game, it's like every muscle in your body tenses up. It's like okay, I have to jump across this entire room. I have to do a running jump, and I have to jump exactly when Laura's left foot is at the very edge of the cliff, and then not only that, I have to hit the grab button when I hit the very edge of the cliff I'm running towards. So there's a lot of those, especially very late in the game, and my roommate just played it, and it was so much fun. Bosses were very easy though, and then we moved on to Tomb Raider 2, and the game froze at the end of the first level, so we moved on to Tomb Raider 3.
Cool.
Yeah. And then, so I think Tomb Raider 3 probably has the hardest, like, first levels in any video game ever, because it's just filled with cheap shots. You walk into a room and all of a sudden a boulder comes and kills you.
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it had so many of those Indiana Jones moments. But yeah, to excuse me from rambling on too long, but yeah, I bought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all for like dirt cheap, by the way. This wasn't an expensive purchase. I even bought 6, which is apparently the worst game in the series.
Hey, maybe it'll be worth lots of money later.
No, it's worth it's worth $8 right now.
Well, right now, but remember we were saying the worst games in a well-known series.
It also got a greatest hits version on PS2, so I think it did sell a lot. It just sucked.
Okay. Well, just wait 50 years, then it'll be rare.
I doubt that.
Jeddy, what video games have you been playing in recent times?
So on the last family game night, which you can watch on our YouTube channel, you can watch it on the archive, as we've begun saying.
Don't call it a VOD. Jeddy will get very upset.
Do not mention the V word. I hate that so much.
All YouTube videos are VODs. They're video.
What if
on
I
demand.
say? What if I say video on demand? Is that acceptable?
But why would
I just
you?
say VOD.
But why would you? What does that mean? Video on demand? Like that's
It
such
means
a.
I can watch
It's
it
like
when I
it's not
demand.
like you're watching it on your TiVo.
I demand a video.
to watch.
Like-
this
I
video.
demand this video, and I click on it.
Yeah, like it's just a video. Like you can say you can watch the video on the archive, but like I'm gonna watch the video on demand version of this video. Kills me. This kills the Jeddy. So anyway, as I had mentioned on Family Game Night, when we were discussing this, I had been playing Mercenaries Saga on the Nintendo Switch, which kind of an indie game from Japan that is a tactical RPG. The thing is like that's all that it is. Like when you talk about Final Fantasy Tactics, there's like, an actual story there that people still go back for the story, even if the gameplay is entertaining but not perfect or whatever. This is just like there's tactical RPG gameplay. There's some bad guys who are bad, and we're gonna go fight them because we're mercenaries. So I played a few hours of that and then gave up. And instead, I have been following some accounts on Twitter that just post like cool screenshots of old video games. And like occasionally I'll be really impressed and I'll go download them. And finally I sat down and loaded them onto my Retro Freak so that I can play these varieties of like, Sega Genesis RPGs that were only released in Japan. Or like, I played some Fatal Labyrinth. That was a good one. I played a game called Great Greed for the Game Boy, and I was very much enjoying the ridiculous plot of that. I was really impressed by the battle system. It was, I don't know, like some of these old games, they were released at a time when like, why are you going to play a Game Boy game when you could be playing Nintendo 64, right? But
I still messes me up. The Game Boy was still in
still relevant,
big, like full production during the N64 era.
Yeah, that like 10 years after release, it's still going. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they had the color. Like, it was a little different.
But
yeah, but I mean, well, no, the color came out in 2000.
Okay, never mind then.
But,
yeah, you're right.
So the color came out in 2000.
Yeah.
So because that was when Pokemon Gold and Silver and Crystal came out.
And
that's a good point.
The thing is,
still blows my mind Nintendo didn't make a backlit handheld for 20 years.
Well, I mean, they did. They just only released it in Japan.
They
How many units did that sell? Like 3?
Yeah, like 3.
But they
apparently no one in Japan liked it. I don't know. I have no idea why they didn't ever sell it in America.
Yeah, I've tried playing some older games, that I had never heard of or whatever before, and was sorely disappointed at the quality of them. It's like, oh, well, there's a reason I've never heard of this one. But these, I don't know, finally sitting down and playing these ones, I had a whole lot of fun and was very impressed by, some of the tricks that they learned 10 years into Game Boy development. So I don't know, maybe I will record some videos.
Maybe we
that
can
you
get some
can
Retro
watch.
Freak Roulette back in action.
Watch on VOD. So, it just does. It feels bad to say. You can watch the video.
Well, first of all,
me
you would
playing
say
the-
watch it on the VOD. Like, you're not saying it correctly.
But
The
didn't I
video.
Or
on
just say
demand.
watch it on the GameCola YouTube channel.
Exactly. So why would you say watch the VOD on the GameCola YouTube? That's
You
dumb.
are
Just
the
say
one
watch.
who said watch it on the archive.
Well, no, but I'm fine with saying watch it on.
Right,
watch...
but that's my point. You could also just
Because it's
leave
the
it.
stream archive
Yeah.
on the GameCola.
Both are correct. Like,
I'm gonna throw my hat in the ring here and say I've never heard anyone use VOD until today.
Really?
Use what?
It's like call it VOD.
Oh,
It's
I've
like-
heard a couple people call it VOD.
Yeah.
but-
It's bothered me every time that I've heard it.
Every time when I hear someone pronounce it, they pronounce it VOD.
well, maybe that's
they
it,
say
depending on
VOD.
your regional accent.
Yeah, depending on your regional accent. Could be.
Maybe I just
Um,
read it as VOD and I've never actually heard anyone say it. But either way, VOD isn't any better. Like giving
Yeah.
a needless abbreviation.
What if we say VOD, but we make it sound like one word, like VOD?
Watch
How do
the
you feel about
VOD.
that?
Watch it on the VOD. Well, then people are just going to be confused.
It's gonna sound like you're just
That's
mispronouncing
also-
video.
It just
That's
sounds
also
like someone doesn't know how to read the word video.
Yeah.
We're all thinking the exact same joke. So, now we're back to videos.
Yeah.
Jeddy, did you actually talk about any of the video games?
Yeah, I
that
told you about.
played?
Yeah, I talked about
in those?
Fatal Labyrinth. I talked about Great Greed. I talked about was
Okay.
it Castle Quest, Brian's Quest. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that I played. I loaded like 30 new ROMs onto my Retro Freak. That I had this like backlog that I've been collecting over like the last year. I was like, I should finally sit down and play these.
Yeah, it would definitely be like I'm sure there's probably, since they're lesser known, there's probably not a lot of people who have seen them. It'd be cool to show them off to people.
Yeah, definitely.
James, what video games have you been playing in recent times?
Oh, boy. So,
Now, James,
I'll
I
get
will
my
remind you,
popcorn.
we are at this point at least an hour into recording the podcast. Just so you're aware.
that's fine. We can make it an extra long one. All right. So after a lot of pauses and break, after kind of a long pause and break,
Mhm.
I finally finished 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. I'm sure I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but it's a game by Atlas and Vanillaware.
People who made Persona would probably be what most people know
Yeah,
them
well,
for.
Atlas are the people who made Persona, and Vanillaware are the people that have made, I think it's like Dragon's Orb. Neither of them were like super amazing, huge hits, but they have a very unique art style, and just, oh my goodness, this game. It is currently up there for my favorite game of 2020. Genuinely. It is, the soundtrack is fantastic. The art is immaculate. One of the most gorgeous 2D games I've seen in recent memory. It's phenomenal. The story is mind-boggling to the point where it's been so long I really can't comprehend anything anymore. It's so heavily convoluted that there is a completion percentage in the game based on how much of the story you've reminisced and tried to follow up on. That's how complicated and interwoven the story is. It's incredibly deep. A streamer, or not a streamer, but a YouTuber I watch had a 10-hour-long live stream just dedicated to trying to piecing the story together after he beat the game, just to give you some perspective. And that was playing the game with only like a 1-day break in between sessions. Like you play the game for about 2 hours and then play a different game the next day and then switching back and forth, making a bi-daily series out of it. And he still needed like 10 hours to go over and discuss the story with his fans in his chat. But the story's incredible. The gameplay, it's a combination of sort of adventure game in the style of LucasArts, if you're familiar with those, and then a real-time strategy sort of tower defense game. And I've never really played those kinds of games before, but I was able to get the hang of it, and those battles get pretty challenging up to the end of the game. Although I will say, on a standard original model base PS4, the last couple battles, not the final battle, but the couple battles leading up to the final battle, there were so many enemies on screen, it was genuinely a slideshow. I am not kidding you when I say I was probably in the single-digit frame rates. It was like, okay, the rest, like, the majority of the game runs just fine on base PS4. That part was so bad. It was so laggy. It was just frankly hilarious how slow the game got during those parts. So be aware of that. It didn't crash or anything. My PS4's fan didn't really go crazy, sounding like a jet taking off. But and for the most part, the performance was solid, absolutely solid. But yeah, just be aware that if you're on a base PS4, those last couple battles can get pretty slow, and they can get pretty difficult, especially if you're not good at that kind of gameplay. But I enjoyed the gameplay. It was a lot of fun. I feel like near the end of the game, you kind of start to lose a little bit of motivation for upgrading parts of your characters. I think you kind of hit a wall. And that's without me going back and replaying missions to get more experience points, which is a thing that you can do and potentially is something recommended if you're playing on harder difficulties. But aside from that, like I would rate this game probably 9 out of 10 if I were doing a GameCola review. But just phenomenal game. It really has not been getting a lot of press. So I've said this before on a much earlier podcast when I first started playing the game. I highly recommend you buy this game just to support the developers and the significant amount of work that went into making it and localizing it and even producing a dub for it almost entirely from home that still somehow sounds like it was done in a professional recording studio. During because it was made during the pandemic. And just, it's phenomenal. If you like any sort of that stuff, just go out and buy this game. It is a treat, and I really think you will enjoy it.
So, I'm sorry, but for anyone who's like listening in their car who got interested after you started talking about it being this game, the game, it... What was it?
13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim.
Okay, very cool. Thank you.
Or Aegis. That's spelled Aegis. So it's like Aegis, Aegis, depending on your regional accent.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
So 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim. It is I should also stress, this is a PS4 exclusive right now. I don't know if it will always be that way. But frankly, I hope it gets brought to other platforms, considering how little marketing Sony has done for it, despite it being an exclusive.
Is it? I mean, PS5 too. Like,
it is a PS4 game. So,
okay,
but it plays on PS5. But it is a PS4 game. It is PS4 Pro enhanced, so 4K rendering and all that stuff.
Okay. Just because PS5, PS4 interactions are in a weird space right now.
Certainly, but I know that you can, I know the YouTuber I was talking about, he bought a PS5, he got it, and he transferred the game over to it, so I would assume you can download it, but it's just a PS4 game is what it's considered.
Okay.
So, and then the other things I've been getting into, I've been buying up a bunch of the Metal Gear Solid games, actually just arrived today. The Metal Gear Solid Essentials Collection, which is the PS2 copies, it has both discs of Metal Gear Solid 1, and then it has the first disc of the enhanced versions of Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3. So that's Substance and Subsistence, but it's only the first discs, meaning not a lot of the bonus content.
Sounds substantive.
I just bought the first game on PS1.
Nice. Awesome. I've never played the series before. I've seen a couple people play it or talk about it. But I kind of wanted to start at the beginning. I actually do own the HD collection on my PS3, although I mainly do that for stuff like Snake Eater, and the enhanced the official localizations of Metal Gear 1 and 2 from the MSX Japanese home computers, which that's the only official way that you can play those, to my knowledge. They're also available on the second discs of Substance and Subsistence, I believe.
They're also on the special features option on Metal Gear 3 in the HD collection.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought, and that's why. And you know, I can play the HD collection versions. I have no problems with that. But I have heard that there are a couple differences between the PS2 and the HD versions of the game. So I figure, plus, now that the PS3 store is shutting down and all that, which, do we want to talk about that?
I don't think we have time.
We don't have time. Well, we'll talk about it next time.
Yeah, we'll talk about it when it has closed.
Yeah. So, but yeah, considering that's going to be happening in a couple months, I wanted to have some physical copies of these games. So I figured, why not get some variety instead of purchasing physical copies of games that I do already own digitally?
Well, I think you're talking about super convoluted stories. I think if you're a fan of super convoluted stories, again, from what I know of Metal Gear Solid, I think you'll be.
I was gonna say it's just as stupid, if not more stupid than King
Nanomachines, son. Nanomachines.
Why are we still here?
Nanomachines.
Just to suffer.
Just to suffer.
All right.
So I think that's a podcast. I think we did it, everyone. We did a podcast. We'd like to thank you here, everyone, for listening and paying their respects to Mario, Jumpman Mario, in this trying time. Thank you for listening to this edition of the GameCola Podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to check us out on our actual internet website, GameCola.net, and as well as our YouTube channel, GCDotNet, the letter G, the letter C, the word dot, the word net. We got Danganronpa 2 stuff going up there periodically. We've got our Family Game Night live streams that we've been doing every Thursday, and we've maintained it for 3 whole Thursdays.
Holy crap.
Wow.
So, I mean, like a pattern, right? So yeah, Thursdays around 8:30 Eastern Standard or Eastern Daylight, whichever one we're in now, time. You can find it. Also, we post, the little thing up beforehand, so you can click on it and I'll tell you what time it'll happen. If you want to know about announcements and stuff like that, though, you could also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for GameCola and you'll find us. And of course, if you like this podcast, maybe you're thinking, I like this podcast, but the platform I'm currently listening to it on is not my preferred platform. Well, I'm happy to tell you that it probably is on your preferred platform, whether that be iTunes, Spotify, a website on the internet with a little video player where you click the play button, YouTube, all those podcatchers that just scan RSS feeds and put podcasts in there. And I'm not really sure how that works or how legal that is, but if that's what you want to do, go for it. We also, if you want to support the show, great things to do. Share it with your friends. Word of mouth is the best way to spread podcasts. You can also rate us on iTunes. Leave us a review if you have some other podcast thing that allows for some sort of rating and commenting or reviewing. Do that too. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to hear from you. Yeah. Those are the things I had to say. Did I miss anything?
Probably.
The letter G, the letter C, the word dot,
the word
YouTube
channel.
Did I say that? I thought I said the letter G, the letter C.
Well, we didn't say the letter G, the letter C, the word dot, and the word
net.
net.
That's the YouTube channel, the letter G, the letter C, the word dot, and the word net. If you want to find it.
It's my favorite bit.
We should change the name to the words. The word, the letter.
Like, what if we literally... Maybe that's what we should do for April Fool's Day.
We do what?
Change it to literally the
letter C.
The letter G, the letter G, the letter C, the word dot, the word net.
I am 95% sure you have to keep the name up for a certain amount of time before you can change it again.
Anyway, thank you for listening to this edition of the GameCola Podcast. Have a wonderful time of day, wherever it is, whenever it is you are listening to this podcast, and we will talk to you next month. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye. Hello?
Did we lose somebody?
Okay, I thought that was just me. I was like, uh-oh.
I thought Joe just cut out
Joe, you there, Joe?
there. No, Nintendo killed him too.
Nintendo got him.
Martin Joseph
Joe!
strikes again.
No.
Joe! Dun,
Joe! Joe!
Dun, 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 dun,
Dun,
dun,
dun,
dun,
dun, dun, dun. Yeah, high five.